rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. This is your brother Nafis Abu Zaid. And with me is my co-host.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. This is Isa Abu Isa, and we're here doing another episode of the Night Shift.
And this is an interview that we'll call main interview here with the Philadelphia Masjid sister. And inshallah ta'ala, we have our brother Imam Nuruddin.
I'm the resident Imam here at the Philadelphia Masjid.
Okay. Would you give us a background, a little bit of the actual area, what's taking place now? He's getting ready to, he's going to show us the outside of the actual building, inshallah ta'ala.
We are standing in front of the Philadelphia Masjid Clara Muhammad School. Actually, this is the school building. The masjid is attached to it. And we've been at this location since 1976. We purchased the property and we started our first school year in 1978.
No.
And in 1978, we went with about, we had from kindergarten to 12th grade, and we had approximately 500 students.
Mashallah. Okay, would you like to show us the extent of the actual
complex? It's a school masjid complex. The campus is a full city block at 47th and Wyerson, and it goes all the way down to Westminster. We have the school with the masjid attached, so we should say we have the masjid school attached to the masjid.
Okay.
And then in the rear we have about maybe an acre of land. It is owned exclusively by the Muslim community.
Okay, mashallah. Mashallah. Okay.
Now, can you tell us a little bit about how the school came about?
All right, the history of this complex, it used to belong to the Archdiocese of Philadelphia.
Okay.
As they abandoned our neighborhoods, we had a location at 1319 Susquehanna Avenue where the Mecca Masjid is located. We had a branch at 3754 Germantown Avenue, and that was temple number 12B. When the community changed from the Nation of Islam to the world community, and we began to consolidate all of our efforts here in West Philly. So all the other subsidiaries closed down. We came over here basically to the school, and we began the school complex, the masjid complex, in 76, and the first graduating class was 78.
No. As far as the connection.
So now the connection, we went from the University of Islam, as it was called, we were at 1319 Susquehanna Avenue. When we came over here, the schools were changed to the Sister Clara Muhammad school system, and we had schools throughout the country. It was named after Clara Muhammad because she was very instrumental in founding the school in Chicago in the 1940s. She actually took her children out of the public school system and began a home school system, and out of that home school system evolved the University of Islam, and with that became the foundation for an educational system for the children of the Nation of Islam. Now, one thing that made Sister Clara Muhammad a historical figure, not just for Muslims, but in America, because she actually started what we may call the homeschool movement. She took her children out of the public schools, and she was threatened with arrest and imprisonment by the government, but she took a firm position. In her position, she would not entrust her children to someone who didn't treat them right, so she didn't want to trust them that they would teach them right. So she started a school system, and she died in 1972. When she died, we had schools throughout the country. New York, Atlanta, Chicago, Philadelphia, Los Angeles were the major schools. And Imam Warbi Muhammad, who took over from his father when he died in 75, he changed the school system to honor the pioneer in education in our community, Sister Clara Muhammad, who was his mother, and she was also the wife of the late Didi Elijah Muhammad. So the school system has been established in the mid-70s. The name was changed, and the school still exists throughout the country.
Now,
MashaAllah.
could you, before we go in, could you just tell us, I know it's getting recorded, could you just tell us the difference between the Philadelphia Masjid and Stickler, how they two different entities?
Okay, the Philadelphia Masjid is the mosque.
Okay.
And that
Okay.
is what is concerned with both the religious movement as well as our, our responsibility to the membership when it comes to their secular lives. The school itself was just involved with the education of children. They were two separate entities. The imam of the mosque generally serves as the director of education, but the school itself had a principal, we had a dean of students, we had an assistant director, so there were two separate infrastructures or administrations. But the school itself, we would call it a wholly owned subsidiary of the masjid. Because, you know, the Muslim community has to take responsibility to educating its children, and it should come under the structure of the masjid.
Nah.
We can go inside.
MashaAllah. Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
And we are now in the area of the school complex. I think we can go downstairs and then work our way back up.
Okay.
So it's basically how any school would be set up. We have this side, we have 4 different levels. And these 4 levels are where all the classrooms are located. This is our cafeteria. So we have a full
MashaAllah.
cafeteria. We have a full commercial kitchen. And we have a gymnasium, which serves as an overflow area for our kids, but it also is for the children. With
No.
their assemblies, with the activities, etc. So we have, like I said, we have the commercial kitchen, we have the gymnasium, and then we have other, I don't think we can get in there right now, but
To,
the gym is directly underneath the musalla. It's the same size. It's about 6,500 square feet.
MashaAllah. To your knowledge, do you know, was there any other Islamic institute that was around in Philadelphia besides yourselves?
Okay, at that time, it was the Islamic Center Community School, which was at Broad and right off of Vine. It was headed by Imam Ali Ahmed,
Okay.
who has always been an associate of ours. And we, as a matter of fact, at one time, he even taught here at the school.
Okay.
After their center closed down.
Okay. Well,
Between that, and we had the Kuba Institute, which was headed by Imam Mohammed, Nafi Mohammed. And his son Anwar, of course, was one of the first American Hafiz of Quran, who was actually born in America and went overseas. So we had that school, we had the Islamic Center Community School, and then we had a few other small efforts in education. As the immigrant community began to grow, then they began to establish their schools like the Oxford Masjid, the Islamic Institute of Villanova. But the main ones in the city started with the Clara Muhammad School and the Islamic Community Center School, the Ali Ahmed.
MashaAllah.
Now, another historical, you going in?
We're going in? Okay. We'll take a look. We're going right now. We're going to go take a look at the actual gym by the permission of Allah.
And as you can see, the gym has been decommissioned as a gym. And we
Okay.
basically use it as a banquet area. We use it sometimes as an overflow for ed activities. We have a walima down here. And you know,
Okay.
it really just serves as a community hall.
Okay.
For those who have a need to have an activity in an
Exactly.
Islamic environment.
Okay.
I do have a briefly, some of the development of Sunni Islam, Sunni Islam in Philadelphia. What was the development of it? Because we know that it went through certain changes. It went through the NOI, came the different stages, the Moorish temple. How did Sunni Islam eventually develop into what it is today in Philadelphia?
Well, there were 2 major branches. I'll speak for our community. The Nation of Islam, when Elijah Muhammad died in 1975, His son, Warthi Muhammad, became the leader. Now, he had been driven out of the community a couple of times. He's the one who was Malcolm's mentor. And so he and Malcolm at one time both decided to leave, and they left together really. So Imam Warthi Muhammad, he came back because he had an idea that he thought he can really turn the community around, and he always would look as the one who would be the leader after his father died. So he came back before his father died, and when his father passed in 1975, it was a blessing from Allah because we all happened to be together in one area. He died on the day before we had our national gathering. So everybody's gathered in one place. Elijah Muhammad dies. Warthi Muhammad comes forward the very next day and says we are all now Sunni Muslims. And that probably was one of the largest mass, we just say, transitions from one thing to another, at least in the history of our people here in America. Now, he didn't come out and say we are Sunni Muslims just like that, but he began to make the steps and take the steps that would take us out of the teachings of the Nation of Islam and bring us into what he then called the World Community of Islam in the West, because he changed the name of the community from the Nation of Islam to the World Community of Islam in the West. And so he's trying to connect us to the Muslim community internationally. And that was the effort that he made, and it was such a smooth transition that really was a blessing from Allah, because I don't think he could have done it by himself, and the environment was just right for that to happen, because again, we were all together, and sometimes when something traumatic happens and everybody's in shock, then that's an opening for one who's sober-minded to come in and say, okay, here is what you need to help you to heal or to get over the trauma. So he came in it was February 25th, 1975. His father died February 24th. And so again, it was a transition. If it happened some other time in the year, it may have been a problem because we'd have been all over the country. But we all had our focus in one place, and then what happened, and the focus, the Qibla was changed, so to speak, from one orientation to another. And we were able to make the transition.
As far as the school, what was the turnaround as far as those who were successful, like the graduates?
Okay, well, and I taught here at the school for 15 years. I taught Arabic, I taught Islamic studies, I taught Sirah, and we've had graduates. The chief counsel down at City Hall for the city council is a graduate of the school. We have judges, we have doctors, some of the most prominent doctors in the country came out of here. So we've always been successful. I would say our graduation rate and college acceptance was in the high 90s. Most of the children who came here, if they stuck with us, then they were able to graduate and be accepted to college. We had a 15-year-old who got a full scholarship to the University of Pennsylvania. And believe me, and he's still with us today. And we have one sister who I want to mention who's very unique. Her name is, I can't call her, Akila. Her name is Akila. Her brother was the first Hafiz. No, he's not the first. Her father, Ishmael and Naima. Who is their son? Akhnuk, right? Yeah, Akhnuk. He's not the first Hafiz, but he's a Hafiz. He's a Hafiz, plus he's a doctor. Now, his sister went to school here. And one thing that one of the presidents at the University of Penn had said to me, because I'm on the Penn Village Community Council, he said the strangest thing they ever saw was a female athlete running track with a khimar and pantaloons and a kameez and winning the race. Now, she was one who came out of the school. So the school has produced, just some very high quality students. Because again, we believe we didn't have the best when it comes to resources. We didn't even have the best minds. But we had a concern for morality, for actually giving children the idea that they can be more than what society assigned them to if they would just live a decent life. And that was really the whole motto of the Clara Muhammad school system, to take children and try to inculcate in them high standards of morality, things like how to eat to live, things like do for self. And see, these are things that gave us a foundation where we felt self-confidence in a world that tried to strip us as a people of our position with, just a dignified member of the human family. Once that dignity was restored, and as the Quran says, Allah has honored every child of Adam, even though the world may say something different. So I think our greatest success, and as students come back, they tell us that, they didn't like the hard treatment, but they appreciated it years later in life.
Okay. MashaAllah.
So we're going to, I guess we can go up, and we're going to probably look at the most important part of the school, which was the Musalla. Every Friday, all 500 children would have to come to Jumuah. Sometimes it was hard because the khatib spent half the time trying to keep the students, just sitting still.
Okay.
But again, it became part of, the standard and the discipline that children, if we put them in them when they're young, it's something that is hard to take out. And so I think, again, that's one of the things. They would stop for the daily prayers. We generally did Dhuhr and sometimes Asr here. But we did Dhuhr every day. And those children that didn't come down to Jumu'ah, because sometimes the kindergarten wouldn't come down. But we did have the PA system, and during Jumu'ah, everything stopped. And if they didn't come to the Musalla for the Jumu'ah, they heard it in the classrooms.
Okay, tight. So right now we're getting ready to go to the Musalla area. Bi'idhnillah. There we will begin to ask series of questions that most of you might want to know or didn't have any clear understandings. And this way it gives us a chance to allow ourselves to bridge the gap, so to speak.
Now, as part of our, again, as Muslims, we always prepared our own food for the children. We didn't take outside food, and so consequently, we've always had to keep the kitchen modernized and updated. We have all the equipment in here now, because when we do start our next education cycle, not only do we want to feed the children well, but we also may want to become a production center for other Islamic entities who sometimes they have to get their food from kosher outlets, etc. We need to standardize our diet so that we can begin to, we just say keep some of our resources among ourselves and build institutions and build business for ourselves. So we've always had the idea of doing for self, and part of our production and part of our development throughout the building, but especially in the kitchen. Because, all of us eat. And we're never going to stop eating. No. And that is where the largest expenditure of our resources goes, into our food, into our diet. So this is very important for us. And we hope, again, to even have, I know during Ramadan, we had a group of young children who were down here who were helping. So we did iftars every morning. We did suhoors every evening. And so we had about 200-300 people a day. And you can imagine, for 30 days,
the strain on.
By the time we finish iftar, it's time for suhoor.
No.
But we had some young people down here, and they had a lot of enthusiasm, and I'm certain without them, it would have been much more difficult, and that's why it's so important for that reconnection with the youth. And one of the areas where we can help is to have opportunities for them. So any young person that even has a product that they want to produce should be able to come to us, give us the idea, and if it's something that makes business sense, they can use this as a production facility.
No.
Alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah.
So we can work our way up.
Yes.
And we're going to life.
So now we're going to the Musalla area, inshallah. Brothers and sisters, this is a historical moment. Again, as we said, we would like to always concentrate on really bridging the gaps, knowing the different aspects of our communities. And in terms of that, we need to know the different individuals and key players that played the role in laying down some fundamental groundwork within our communities. And this does not in no way compromise our deen or impede our progress, as many would like us to believe that this is more so hindering towards equality, but that is an incorrect understanding. And inshallah ta'ala, without this interview, y'all be able to understand that, hopefully, with a series of questions with our elders, inshallah.
Now, we're going to have to do eminent domain.
Okay.
Because the scouts are in here now. And what we're going to do, you ready to go back? This is Imam Leo, he's in charge of the scouts. We have Sheikh Charlie, they are. Sheikh Malik. And they're ready to go outside?
Yeah, we're getting everybody dressed, make sure they warm enough. We go outside, do some PT.
So we're going to take over the Musala right now.
No problem. So we're about to pull up.
If you mind, can you give us at least a little bit background to the Jawala Scouts?
Okay, we can let Imam Leo.
Don't want to take up too much of his time, but if you can give us a little bit background,
Brief background on that.
brief background to the Jawala
You
Scouts.
don't mind me sitting.
Go ahead.
Okay. Alhamdulillah. Wild Scouts was a program. I'm not going to leave names out. You do the research. But the Wild Scouts was a program that was established by one of the elders who was indigenous, just like some of the brothers you mentioned here, helping establish Islam in America as an African American or black man, whatever you want to call it, and a Muslim. You know what I mean, of the Sunnah. So we incorporated a program with the Sunnah Islam, and pretty much more than a traditional Boy Scout or Army establishment, but we do focus on the outdoor camping, of course, the fishing, living skills, horseback riding, archery, all that kind of events, hiking, those kind of events, learning how to swim, all of that. Coupled with the Islamic aspect of the religion, so the basic fundamentals of Islam, the Tawheed. They're a dab and a musalla, a dab and salat, they're a dab to the elders, they're a dab, all of that, a dab and a hammam, a bathroom, a dab, so we teach all of that. And we incorporated it, meshed it into a program. And we raised the young men into, older young men, you know what I mean, from, we take them at the age of 5, all the way up until 16, 17, 18. And traditionally, the other scout programs, just in brief, usually take them at 7 or 8. We take them at 5. If they can handle it and they can stand in rank, we take them at 5. So that's how we operate it here. So,
Alhamdulillah, barakallah
Mashallah, barakallah fiik.
Alhamdulillah.
Is there an oath for anything that y'all have?
yes, we do have an oath. You want to hear the oath?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Sheikh.
Let's do our oath all together.
My God, the Sunnah, my practice, Jihad is my spirit, righteousness my capture, paradise my goal. Find joy was right, for there was wrong. Find it so precious to the God of the
16 duties of Jumuah Scout.
Read your hand, ask now every day.
We need you.
Stay hadith, Sarah, Akida. Stay physically fit. Observe cleanliness and tidiness. Be true. Keep your promise. Be active and energetic.
Be proficient in reading and writing.
Undertake some active enterprise. Give in charity. Save a portion of your earnings. Remember our love much as possible.
Now stop. Ahmad is leading. Who got $10 today? Who got $10? So I should hear y'all more than everybody. Y'all follow their lead.
Okay, Imam Leo.
Yes,
This
sir.
was impromptu. They did a great
They
job.
good. Let them do it again. Let them do it again. Go.
How you gonna get him?
Go. On the minds, go. Go.
Read word and act law every day.
Study hadith, share Nakida. Stay physically fit. Observe clean
Seventh Evolution.
Giving charity, saving a portion of their earnings, remembering loss and others honestly, congregation is not content to be said. And what about earnings, give downward, fast once a month.
Barakallahu feek.
Barakallahu feek.
Barakallahu feek.
We want to appropriate this area here.
Okay, we take it.
So y'all you can move this. Yeah.
No, we coming right out. We leaving.
So this is the masjid, the Masala. And again, it's attached to the school. Now, just the history to show you the evolution. I can remember the first time I came here when we got the building, we used the stage. And we had theater auditorium seating. We had benches and chairs in here because it was a regular school auditorium.
Okay.
Once we made the transition and it was clear, we took all the seats out. We leveled the floor and we began to face the east. We were facing this direction for Jumu'ah. We were facing east. Because again, the building is laid out for it to be a very, we just say symmetrical shape because of the shape of the building. But as we evolved Islamically, we oriented the Qibla, as the Quran says, facing the direction of the sacred masjid. So we went from just facing east, because you know, generally in America, we said we face east. So we took it literally initially. And as we grew, the Qibla began to be oriented in this direction, which is east by northeast, 32 degrees.
MashaAllah. You can actually see the minbar there, 3 steps, as the Prophet ﷺ had 3 steps. You know, also they actually have a mihram here. Let me move a little bit closer so you guys can see.
Now this mihrab, there are 3 like it in the country. I don't know what the third one is, but I know myself and Imam Adib Mehdi, we built this in '76. Now, the third one, the second one, we have one like this. We had one in Graterford Prison. Because in I don't know what year that was, in 1978, 79, we built the first masjid inside a prison in America at Graterford, Pennsylvania, and we had a mihrab just like this. That we, the third one we took to Cleveland, Ohio. Imam Clara was the imam there. So, and as we began to change or to evolve Islamically, that we knew that we had to have certain standards, and those standards are both seen in how we believe, as well as how we orient ourselves, and you know, just things that are not just part of the Islamic culture, but are reminders of what our deen is. And so the Qibla, the mihrab, and the minbar, and that really this minbar is very new.
Okay.
I think when Abu Isa was here, wasn't he?
No, I wasn't here when I was
Yeah,
here.
that was just 3 weeks ago.
Yeah,
Alhamdulillah.
Yeah, so this is
You
new,
still see the sawdust.
and we still have work to do on this.
It's nice though.
But
mashallah.
inshallah, as we evolve as a Muslim community here in America, we should begin to see more of the Islamic culture in the things we do, but it would have the very unique, we just say touch that we can bring to it as those who live here in the West.
No.
No, alhamdulillah.
Okay, so what we just did, the first part of this interview was the retracing our steps. The next part of this interview, inshallah ta'ala, as we sit down and ask a serious questions to our elders, will be bridging the gap between, you know, both generations, as well as, you know, the old and the young, as well as bridging the gap between communities, inshallah ta'ala. Jazakallah.
And I would just like to introduce the staff that I have with me.
Okay.
We have our Amir Saifullah Muhammad.
Okay.
We have Imam Jamil, who is the assistant imam here.
Okay.
We have Brother Fareed Hassan Fareed, who is also on the Amir staff.
Okay. That's what, mashallah. So this is the administration, pretty much.
Yeah, this is a part of it.
A part of the administration,
The
mashallah.
administration is much bigger than this.
Okay.
Because we do have infrastructure that's necessary. And see, one thing we can't do is one person can't do, or one small group of people can't do it. If we had to do it by ourselves, we would not be able to make it.
No.
So we have a very good team that works with us.
Okay.
Some of them will also be coming in later on. We may get a chance to meet them. So we can sit and we can go to the next phase.
East, what I would like to do, I'd like me and you to sit here when we ask them the questions and return the camera around to see us.
We're going to have to face the camera towards us.
Yeah, yeah. No. Turn the camera all the way around and just sit with him
Okay.
like that.
All right. I know what you're saying. Turn the camera around here. Get y'all in here.
You see if you can move.
I don't know if I'll be able to move it.
Yeah, I can see you a little bit.
Maybe somebody might have to hold them and be in front of us.
No, I can see you in here. You should be able to catch me.
Only
There you
move
go.
like that. All right. Okay.
All right, that's pretty much good. All right, Ish, you can start off with the first question, inshallah.
Okay. Our first question that most everybody wants to know, we're gonna go right into that.
Okay.
Yeah.
What was the progression from the NOI, then to Wallace Muhammad, then to where you guys are today? Because most people believe that from some of the statements that, or some of the things that was said by Wallace Muhammad, obviously, right?
Right.
Contradict the standards sometimes of the Islamic Aqidah.
Right.
From the Kitab and the Sunnah. So, what was the progression from that? And being as though you were followers of Wallace Muhammad, how did you get past those statements and rectify them to where you're going today?
Okay,
If that's clear.
Yeah, that's a very good question. And again, we can go historically. We can look at the passing of Elijah Muhammad. When Elijah Muhammad passed, for the overwhelming majority of his followers, that was the end of that era or that period. Because Imam Warathuddin Muhammad, the very next day, he began to reorient and redirect our focus and to take us out of the teachings that came with the Nation of Islam and to bring us toward the Quran and the Sunnah. Now, because he was dealing with a situation that at that time was 40 years in the making. So that meant that it's almost like an ocean liner. You can't just turn it around on a dime. So he began to redirect it. And he also had to deal with a people who had very, very different, we'll just say, levels of understanding and development. And in mathematics, you have to deal with the lowest common denominator. And so sometimes he said things that were reduced to elementary stuff that it's almost like baby language. And even he himself saw that was holding him back from what he felt was his real mission, because eventually he resigned as the leader. And that resignation was a sign for us that we were on our own. In Philadelphia, we took it serious. And so we used him as a preferred authority when it comes to certain social perspectives. Like, he told us that we should see ourselves as being Americans. It doesn't mean that we come under American authority, but we live here, and so we have to make a living here. So when it comes to social constructs, he is a preferred authority in some areas. But when it comes to the Quran and the Sunnah, there's only one authority, and that's Allah's Messenger. And I believe in Philadelphia that we were more successful in being able to break away from that. And so consequently, we may be a little more progressive than others. So our evolution, and I can speak for myself. I came into the community in '71. I went to a fruit class, a FOI class in New York. Warathuddin Muhammad was the guest speaker under Minister Farrakhan. He recited the Quran. And the Quran, he recited Surah Fatiha. I was so amazed by it that I went and got a book called Teachers of the Quran. And in the Nation of Islam, between 1972 and 1975, I had learned the last juz of the Quran. And I used Sheikh Husari and Abdul Bassett, because they were just coming out with the cassettes and the videos, not video, but cassettes.
The cassettes,
And so I was able to get, because I had an ear for the language. I had an ear for language. And so some of us, even under Elijah Muhammad, because Mu'adh Muhammad, his brother Akbar Muhammad, who went to El Azhar as part of the Nation of Islam. So some of us began to learn the religion. And when Elijah Muhammad passed away, we were in position to begin to teach from the Quran and the Sunnah. So that transition began in '75 with the passing of Elijah Muhammad. The Imam really freed us here in Philadelphia when he said he was no longer the leader of the community, because he saw that his work was more as a social activist, similar to how Malcolm saw himself. And he didn't want to be bogged down, because he even made a statement that is real. He said he believed that 70% of his imams had failed to learn the religion the way they should have. And so consequently, the membership was not able to grow. In Philadelphia, it was a little different. Now, things have changed since he made this statement in the late 90s, he died in 2008. So he's been dead almost 10 years. So the statement that he made, he really felt that not he himself, but a lot of his imams. And so sometimes we look at the membership of his community that came out of the Nation of Islam, and we can see a people who may have good intentions. They may be sincere, but they just need to make a connection. And this is why this next generation is so important, that we can make the connection, and hopefully we don't have any animosity or any, we say apprehension with one connecting with the other. So here in the Philadelphia Masjid, we have been pretty successful in continuing to evolve or continuing to grow. And we don't see we don't feel any reluctance to having anyone come among us and be a khatib, do classes. We've had our brother Imam Shadid here with us for about three and a half years, and he's done a lot to help to dispel some of the notions that people have had about the other Muslim, the other type of Muslim. Because, sometimes people will say, well, they don't speak our language. And that means that, and that's more the social language. The language for the Muslim is the Arabic of the Quran and the Sunnah. So I don't know how someone can say they don't speak their language. But then you have social construct like do for self, remake the world. See, these are things that were part of the cliches of the community. And if people don't hear that, then, they feel, okay, he's not speaking my language. And there are others who, if we don't cite certain authorities or certain chains of hadith, then they only take from certain chains. And so, people only took from a certain chain, and we have to link the chains together.
Okay, mashallah. My question to you, in terms of the creedal issues that many might ask to deal with the Philadelphia Masjid, those who transition from the Waterford community, they have this, I want to say they have a conception that they believe that you guys do not believe in the authentic creed, as what they consider to be authentic creed. Y'all don't hold those beliefs. I would hopefully like for you to shed light on that. Is there any difference in terms of creed, or is the same belief system that Warfdeen has? Is it still predominant, or is there any difference in there?
Okay, Imam Warfdeen didn't have a creed system. He wasn't a faqih. He didn't deal with aqidah. He wasn't a mufassir, muhaddith. He was none of those, he took none of those positions where we get the classical Islamic knowledge. Now, it was up to the individuals. Now, I taught here for 15 years. We had Imam Mufassal. All the children had to learn Imam Mufassal. Amantu billahi wa malaikatihi wa kutubihi wa rasulihi wa yawm al-akhirah, ila al-akhirah. So, we had that and it depended on each individual area. The strength of that leadership is reflected on what the people begin to learn and understand. So we didn't have a nationwide system where the imam had his aqidah or he had his way of belief. People basically were autonomous. And he decentralized the community because being centralized is a security risk to some extent. If the center go down, the whole thing can go down. So he decentralized things, and people were basically left on their own with encouragement to learn the classical knowledge in Islam, the what we may call the knuckle. He said you get the akal and then you get the knuckle, meaning that we have to have a perspective, but we also have to know that there's a classical position for everything we do in Islam, and those classical sources is where we begin. And so we had to go back to the beginning. And the beginning for us was Iman Mufassal, Buni al-Islam al-Khams, the hadith of Umar, radiallahu anhu. That became a foundation for us. Now, in some areas, it was stronger than other areas, both in the city and in a masjid inside the city. And I would like to think that here at the Philadelphia Masjid, we've been pretty successful at helping the people to understand there's only one standard aqidah for the Muslim. That's Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah. We want to phrase it like that, but it's what the Prophet, alayhi salatu wasalam, how he and his companions believed. It's only one way of worship. He said, pray as you see me pray. He told us how and when to fast, and he told us about zakat and hajj. And so these are the basic standards that have always been acceptable to us. But see, sometimes we can look at the weakest link, and we can say, because this person's understanding may not be what it should be, then maybe that's how all of them are.
And that's not true.
No, that's not true.
And right now, brothers and sisters, you're hearing it directly from the imam that this is not their position, and they do believe in the standard Western. This is very important because this bridge a gap. There's a conception out there that we can't deal with people who laid down the groundwork. As you've seen, they established institutions here in Philadelphia, here in America and abroad, way before, inshallah ta'ala, a lot of us even knew about Salafi and certain creeds. So it's not respectable that we don't give respect to that. We have to give respect to that. So inshallah ta'ala, jazakallah khair for clearing that up. Brother Issa will ask you another question.
No. Another question that we want to get this myth out of here is that what they think about these communities, whether it's Masjid Allah, whether it's Philadelphia Masjid or whatever, people kind of group you all guys together, and they say that you are nationalistic. And we know that they say that because we know that nationalism or putting your tribe or another is not from Islam. They say that you're a black nationalist. They say that you only care about black people. They say that you have the same concept about race that the NOI had, that the white man is a devil and that black people are above them in some ways. This is some of the myths that exist when they talk about this community, which could clear that up for us, inshallah ta'ala.
Yeah, well, again, if we took a snapshot from the 40s and the 50s and the 60s, then that might be, something that someone can to. And even some people who may speak the old language are still tied to the old way of seeing things. We may just take that as being a position that all of us have. Our position Islamically is the Quran says in Surah 49, where Allah says that He, O mankind, surely we created you from a nation and a tribe, from a male and a female, and we made you nations and tribes so you may know each other. This is the decree of Allah, and we don't see Islam as something that someone has because of the color of their skin. But it's the taqwa, that's the thing that makes people better.
No. Alhamdulillah. What would you say, what would be one of the important reasons why we need to bridge the gap? Why do you believe that the communities, especially here in America and Philadelphia, need to bridge the gap? What would be one of those important highlighting points?
Well, because the Prophet ﷺ said anyone who doesn't respect the elders or the young is not of his ummah. So that's reason number one. And number two, we need each other. Because, see, we're not going to live forever. What we have done is of no value if we don't have someone that can inherit from us. And those who inherit, we know the learned are the inheritors. And so, brothers, and I don't think this hadith is there just with happenstance. The learned are the inheritors of the prophets. I think the Prophet, he said that. So we have young brothers who have learned. They have gotten the information and knowledge. They can now begin to help to balance. Because see, there are deficiencies on both sides. As we get older, we don't have the energy of the youth. We really don't even have the long vision or long sight of the youth. So we do need to have youth who can see beyond just the next 5 or 6. I can't imagine 20 years from now and plan for it. I mean, I have to plan for it, but I really can't, we just say realistically think I'm going to be in the same position I'm in now in 20 years. But the youth, they should be able to see 20 years into the future. And so we need them if we're going to have a future ourselves. We need them if our efforts that we have made are going to have any lasting value. So, but at the same time, we need them because they're our family. See, many of the youth who are out there, there are maybe 2 or 3 degrees of separation at the most. We had 500 children here every year. Many of them have gone out. They have children. A lot of their children have been estranged from us because they didn't need what we needed 40 years ago, and so they think that what we had is old-fashioned.
No.
And so they disconnected. But they're still our children.
No.
They're still our blood in many cases, but they are people who are closer to us than anybody else. And so we have to, we just say, mend the rift that is in our community, because the rift is not just among the Muslims. The rift is in neighborhoods. It's in societies, and there are many, many who are in this neighborhood who are Muslim. We had a janazah here about 2 years ago, about 800 young people here. I asked them, and some of them said they had never been here before, right? I said, well, where do you live? He said, I live at 46 in Brown. He's a Muslim right around the corner, but had never been here. And this is a neighborhood that we share together. And so in order for us to be responsible in our neighborhood, we have to be together. So, both can bring valuable contributions. But if we had no other reason other than the fact that we are, we can't sever the ties of relationships. We have to bring those ties back together. That's part of our religious obligation. So we have to, because I think the Emir Saifullah said when his niece got married, she had some problems. I don't know if you want to speak about it, but I think that's an illustration of just how the rift from one generation to the next can create issues and problems that become a burden for us. And so we have to try to make certain that we don't carry each other's burden. Meaning that if someone is burdened by what they think I believe, they should ask me about it so they don't have to carry it. Because if it is something that's wrong, it's my burden, and you can help me lighten it by just giving me an opportunity to get some of it off of me. And then the youth, they have a burden, and their greatest burden is how are they going to be established as, we just say, in this environment, as an individual, as a family, because it's much more difficult today for youth to establish themselves. I mean, they get married, and many marriages don't last because they don't have the resources.
No.
So part of what we can help them with, we can show them how to establish yourself in this type of environment, which is really just such a, we just say there's so much inequity that we have to be together to face the challenges of economics, of education, of the criminal justice system. We know a lot about these things. They come face to face with it, and they don't have any ability to respond. And so they get caught up, and they get chewed up by the economics, by the, I mean, you go into the prisons, many of the people in prison are Muslim. And some of them were Muslim when they went in, or they become Muslim when they in, and then they go back to criminality when they come out. So we have to begin to help to alleviate some of this problem.
As you were speaking, Brother Imam, I had an idea came to my mind, and I would like to invite all of you individuals who have any type of position, whether it be in any type of community, especially here specifically, the Salafi communities, to come out and we have, if you don't mind, we have here as an open dialogue, a way to actually move on, talk about some real solution-based things to connect the communities, because this separation has to stop. Especially this blanket understanding, as you hear the Imam is saying, you carrying the burden, believing something about someone without even having, let's say, having the fortitude or having the, actually having the actual, I want to say, manhood to actually approach that person to find out what it is that they actually believe. And are they closed-minded? Are they open-minded? These things need to be addressed. So if anyone can go to their local imams or any of their local masajids and tell them that we're calling out for an open dialogue of, bridging the gap, actually. What you think about that?
Yeah, I think bridging the gap, if there are gaps between us, then we have to bridge it, because nothing is stagnant in creation. And the gap either will get bigger or get smaller.
Mashallah.
And if it gets any bigger than it is today, all of us are going to end up on an island by ourselves.
And that's pretty much where
we are today.
the ship is going at pretty much today.
I mean, and then if you're on an island by yourself, it's hard to keep your family together, because what your family needs may be somewhere else.
Exactly.
And they will leave you to go to get what they need. And so we have to bridge the gap.
Can you explain some of the social reform that you and you guys, you elders, have always in your community has always been participating in, as far as the social reform of any society, and the society that y'all been in, the role that y'all play? I think that's very vital for, especially for the youth, to understand that this role has already been, tackled and addressed.
Yeah. Well, when the dynamics were different in the 60s, we were part of a movement that was a social movement. And when I say social, I mean there was a lot of dynamism in society. You had the anti-war movement, you had the black power movement, the struggle. So we had people who were engaged with the idea of being part of a movement. And so this was more a social movement than a religious movement. And so socially, we had very much success in the prisons. Malcolm came out of the prisons, and many of the leadership in the community came into, we just say, contact for the first time in their lives with something that led them to Islam while they were in prison. And one of the most successful prison reform movements was the movement that was founded by the Nation of Islam. The other element that we had, when people come out of jail, what do? So we had an economic program. Every brother became a salesman or a merchant. You were selling either Muhammad Speaks. We were importing millions of pounds of fish from Peru every month. And so a brother can go into the fish business. In Philadelphia, we had the steak and takes. We had the bean pies. We had the juice factory. New York had over 100 steak and takes. Mm-hmm. And so brothers, again, if you wanted a job, you can get a job doing for self. Everybody wasn't a merchant. So many were encouraged to go back to school, and they began to involve themselves in the other types of business or even working for somebody. But in the community, under the Nation of Islam, brothers had to work. And we used to have to carry a card that says, I am a Muslim. If you find the possessor of this card breaking any laws, you should turn him over to the police. I mean, it was a card, I'm ad-libbing, but it was similar to that. Because, see, the stress was to be upright and to be decent, to be hardworking, to take care of your family. And because we had activities throughout the week, so brothers were always at the temples, we call them then. And it was almost like a basic training. For like the military, when they undergo basic training, you really begin to get a certain spirit of unity. You begin to have a certain discipline. You begin to have certain standards, and then you can operate with a more cohesive program or agenda. There was a very specific agenda that the Nation of Islam had. We even had an airplane. And as a matter of fact, the brother who was the pilot, his name was Sultan Muhammad. He was Elijah Muhammad's grandson. Now his son, Sultan, is now, and he graduated from the Islamic University of Medina. So he's in Chicago now, and he heads the program for Minister Farrakhan, and he's trying to do the same thing among them. So, it's that community. We shouldn't write them off, but we do know that, they still have to get over the same hurdles that we had to get over. And their preferred authority has become Allah and His Messenger. And so as long as they still have human beings who are the preferred authority, they have that hurdle. But the community itself, because we had a dynamic spirit where we were a movement, it was much easier for us to pool our resources, to do things based on the standards that we had, and to be willing to make sacrifices to do for self. And part of the sacrifice was a brother, if he was just selling Muslim or Muhammad speaks, if he was just selling fish, if he was just selling, because see, once you start selling people stuff, then the idea, okay, I can sell them something else. And you actually expand your ability to be a merchant. And so the do for self spirit was very strong.
Well,
Go ahead.
I mean, it's actually a two-part question. We know we had an influx of our generation, and maybe the generation before us, because some of the brothers are a little older than me and this brother. It was like a mass migration to go to the Middle East in the 90s and in the early 2000s and things like that. A lot of us went over, we learned Orthodox Islam, which they call it Sunni Islam or Salafiyya. A lot of us came back with that Orthodox version of Islam. My first question part is that the rift that happened, what's some of the reasons that you believe that rift happened? That's the first question. After brothers came back, what happened between the elders and the younger people? The second question would be, how do we now use the academics of the youth who came back, who may not have a certain extremism with them or a certain harshness against the elders? How do we get that academics mixed with you guys' experiences and resources? That's the two-part question.
Okay, well,
Before you answer that question, I do want to mention something back what you were saying, and that was the importance of where did the value go? Brothers and sisters, where did that value go? Where did that institution go at? Because most of the things that the brother Imam just mentioned, if not all, that was a system that actually worked, and it have worked it. And I believe that, it's okay to focus on creed, Tawheed, but where is our social reform? Where is our building up each other? And this is something that we had to all think about, because a lot of times brothers always push, well, they have the correct Aqidah, have to be right, the minhaj have to be right. But where do we have anything at? We don't have nothing to provide for our families. We don't have no economic system that's put in play. And this is something that I see that you guys were successful in actually doing, and I believe that it didn't go against any of the Quran.
okay, yes, I think I can.
No, I'm not asking him a question. I'm just answering. I'm talking to them. Oh, yeah.
So, see, the one question, we don't feel that we created a rift that came from us, but we may have become complacent. And when we became decentralized, then sometimes our focus wasn't now on trying to reach our people or stay in contact with them, but our focus was on just maintaining what we had. So we probably became more internalized in our focus than external, or just having relationship with people. And also we began to sometimes when you have come out of a situation and look at our communities in general, when people have some achievement, then they want to leave, and the ones that are left behind, it's a rift there, but the ones who left, they weren't doing it to create a rift, they were doing it to move on. And so I think we moved on, but we didn't move on with the knowledge that we needed. And so our movement wasn't something that others can see, okay, we have to follow. They said, well, no, they're going in the wrong direction, or they're not on the straight path. And I think that's what a lot of the youth saw, because we were moving into areas that were more for the enhancement of individuals. And even the reason why a lot of our economic engine was dismantled, because if you have it all concentrated, you can have one or two individuals that can just take over. And there were some who were using the economic engine for personal gain. And the Imam saw a lot of things, Imam Wafi Muhammad, and he dismantled them because it was too much of an opportunity when you have centralized, and we see corruption in government, we see corruption in countries overseas where they have tremendous resources. So we know when you have a lot of resources, you can have people around who take advantage. And
Well, the hearts can be the hearts can definitely be ugly and be diseased. You know, the law talks about it. The Prophet ﷺ talks about it.
Yeah. So that riff on that side, and so I think because our movement was disconnected. Because see, and again, if we look at the W.B. Du Bois with the Talented Tenth and things like that, how they became disconnected from Booker T. Washington, and even though it was one community, there may have been a perceived rift or a what they call a generation gap. So I think it's more a generation gap because one generation moved on, and we sort of left the other generation behind, or we disconnected, or those of them who went overseas, when they came back, they saw that we weren't going in a direction that their knowledge was projecting or propelling them. And so, we didn't look back. And so to some extent, we didn't recognize how great the problem was.
And that's on both sides, or just
Well, I'm
so
just
on?
speaking from the side of the elders. We didn't, we have personal encounters, but I didn't know the extent of all of the fatwas that may have been rendered or some of the positions that were taken. I didn't know they were extensive until just recently. Because you hear things, but see, as a nation of Islam, we were used to hearing that anyway. Because you can imagine what we heard in the 60s.
Right,
And there were groups who were right here in Philadelphia, they wouldn't call us Muslims, they would call us muckmucks. And so, we sort of were able to understand why as we look back. But when it was going on, it was a real serious issue. And some serious consequences sometimes happen because of that. So the RIF itself is particular to us, but it's not something that is exclusively, because there's a generation gap between the old and the young, between classes. And so sometimes, because see, many of the younger brothers, their constituency, a lot of them have been in prison. And so when you have that type of constituency, it's more a class, there are class elements that are involved that now take on religious connotations, or they be justified by religion. But to some extent,
to behave the way that they behave.
Well, I'm doing this because
so their religion justify it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think we've seen that historically, even with the split between the Sunni and the Shia. We've seen some justification based on that became religious, but it was more political and even ethnic in its initial manifestation. Because those who were the Persians of extract, they never were comfortable being under the Arabs. And so they basically went back to that after, the Khulafa had gone.
Was there ever an open dialogue?
Yeah. The second part.
Yeah, the second part was how do we now,
If I can-
academics and experience together.
If I can chime in on the question that was previously stated by you to reinforce what the Imam said, how do we go about solving that rift? There's always been the policy of the Imam that truth will always overtake falsities. So we didn't engage ourselves in any hostility. Our policy was to reach out to the brothers that came from abroad. There's been numerous brothers that we have reached out to, from Sheikh Ali Davis, the Shadi, the Beige, Sheikh Jumani. In fact, this community goes all the way back to the late Dr. Ishmael Faruqi. May Allah have mercy upon him and his wife and grant him paradise. And he was actually the professor of Islamic Studies in Temple University. And he had produced many students, such as Salman Youssef. So this community goes way back with a relationship Islamically that was sound based on figures who was renowned in the Islamic community at large outside America. So I think that our efforts in bridging the gap paid off because by us being older brothers and coming through the Nation of Islam and basically really going through the same experience that we seen our brothers go through that came back from abroad. We surmised basically that that was just an identity, you understand, problem more than it was a real problem. And we knew that that identity problem would eventually work itself out and that they would realize that they are us as we realized that they was us. And we knew that if we was going to survive, we had to survive in bringing ourselves back together. And so we knew, just like how we came to the Nation of Islam, we were sincere, we didn't have the right Aqidah, but because we were sincere, and our prophet, peace be upon him, said that religion is sincerity. Because everybody may not be knowledgeable. Everybody may not know the Arabic language. Everybody may not have the ability to teach. But Allah is just. Everybody can be sincere. And that's a goal that's attainable for everybody. So we knew that our brothers were sincere, because if they wasn't sincere, they wouldn't have left this country, went to a foreign land, a foreign culture, with teachers that was even foreign because they was not of their own identity. So we knew all that was the real gist, and that gist eventually will work itself out, as it has. We're witnessing right now a group of young brothers who have come back and opened their arms to us, and our arms have always been open to them. And we have brought these brothers in to bridge the gap, to teach the knowledge, because we understood our own personal deficiencies. And those deficiencies were that we was not educated in the traditional sense in the way that the religion was revealed to our prophet, peace be upon him. These brothers went abroad and they learned that language in that traditional sense. But when they came back, they did not have the experience that we had by putting the work in, so to speak. And when you put work in, you get educated. I mean, if you ain't a carpenter, but you're working with a carpenter, after a while, you become a carpenter yourself. So a lot of our Islam came about from putting the work in, because the blessings is in the work. So we think that now we are in a very promising position because we feel comfortable now. Our greatest concern was that when the young brothers came back and they said things that, we didn't really like, but we understood as we thought we knew something, and we went out our parents' house, we came back and said things to our parents now. We thought we was grown, because we went out and we experienced some things. So we knew that these brothers had went out and, they had gained the knowledge and everything. And when they came back, we was excited because we said, okay, we got a future now. And we didn't expect them to come back and start teaching against us and scorning us and saying, that we wasn't on the path. But we understood that, and we always understood that we always had to have an amicable position. And it was based on that amicable position that we begin to bridge that gap. Like I said, from Ali Davis, Bay, Sheikh Shadi, we have had numerous of brothers coming here. We even had to take flack from our own community too, because our community had problems.
And that's very important that you mention that, because a lot of people, as earlier what the brother Imam said earlier, it's not easy to return the ship just because, okay, now this is the way we're going to go. No, it takes time, baby steps to remove that. And the fact that you just acknowledged that we took slack from our own people, and trying to bring about this transition and bridging this gap, is something tremendous. So I think that the question that need to be asked, honestly, to me, is, did the brothers, those who went overseas and actually learned, their information, did they try every effort possible to open a dialogue with our brothers and bridge the gaps with our elders? Did they try to, actually teach instead of just excommunicate, just write you off and, they're deviant, leave them alone, they're not going to change, they're not going to this? Did they do that? I mean, that have to be a question that, and be person to be honest with themselves. If they haven't took those steps, like you said, with our parents.
Yeah, I would say the question is not did they do it, but will they do it?
Oh,
And
yeah.
then it goes back to something that Esau said, how do we now bring the academics to, and so I think we need to follow this up with some seminars, some forums, where we can, again, recapitalize the history, because we're going to probably have to do this
Another
for a
time.
while.
No, it's gonna take.
Recapitalize it, but see, are we willing to listen to what each other says rather than listen to try to rebuke or respond?
Well, from the audience, I can tell you right now, the people are engaging, people are asking questions, and this is something that I think they will love to see. As myself, I definitely would love to see. So we're going to push for the open dialogue.
Yeah, because we can
and
have
hopefully
open-
we can have the open dialogue and we can sit down and start building more. The open dialogue is not to, you don't have to ask regurgitating questions, or where they leave off this, where they accept the kitab. So they're already telling you what they're doing. We're willing to accept, we're willing to move, but we also have something to learn from them. It ain't just that they have something to learn from us. We can both learn from each other and bridge those gaps.
And see, one method that we've used in the past has been successful, because again, Esau had asked the question, how do we bring the academics? Imam Shadi did a series of seminars here. And, he did them in Ramadan as well as throughout the year. And there would literally be hundreds of people here. And many of those people had thought they would never step foot in here, or if they stepped foot in this building, the boogeyman would just but when they come in, because one of American statements said we have nothing to fear but fear itself. And so sometimes we just are afraid of fear.
Exactly.
But when we face our fears, then we are able to overcome
We
them.
witnessed that. After we interviewed Shadid Muhammad, it was like someone made a comment that said, who they going to interview next, the Shaitan? Well, the other billah.
And ask Shaitan what happened in Jannah.
And actually, Shaitan what happened to Jannah. I mean, we're going to get that type of thing, because people, normally what they do is they fight against something that's positive, and they know that it's right. So they just, I call it withdrawal.
So we have an institution here, a campus. We got 17 classrooms. The capacity is 500. And all these brothers who have gotten knowledge, the building is available. So all we have to do is come in, and we need classes like this. And actually, I wouldn't call them classes. It's almost like group therapy sessions. We need some group therapy, but then we also need some serious classes. Because see, sometimes going overseas gives you the wrong perspective. Many overseas think America is just such an ungodly place that there can be no Islam in America. And so anything in America that calls itself Islamic must be tainted. So now if we can build institutions here, we have enough brothers who have ijazah, or really they just had the freedom to teach what they know, and we can continue to build our scholarship so that as Timbuktu, at one time was such an obscure outpost, but during the Middle Ages, it was the center of learning for the Islamic world. And this was on the dark continent, as the West referred to it, but there was a center of Islamic knowledge and scholarship that I don't think has been surpassed in many of the Islamic countries. And so that possibility existed then. With the technology we have today, we can duplicate that easily here in America. And I think that's one way to bridge the gap, is to begin to build institutions. Because institutions give people a sense of belonging to something bigger than themselves. When you see an institution, the Kaaba is an institution. Prayer itself is an institution. And no matter how big I think I am, when I'm praying with my brother, it really should humble me and make me see it's something bigger than me. And if we can pray together, if we can fast together, as the Prophet ﷺ said, then we are together. And so things like that, and then we can extend that to if we can learn together. Because if we're learning the Quran, if we're learning the authentic sayings of the Prophet, then, there's no distinction in one or the other. Because if I recite Al-Fatiha in China, and they don't speak English and I don't speak Chinese, but we can form a unity or a bridge. And so when we come together and we have a standard, then that should be the thing that gives us some unity, even if it's not uniform. We don't have to have the same uniform, but we do have to have the same unity. That's ikhlas. And if we have that, then Allah said He'll bring our hearts together, but only He can do it. We just have to have the intention, and then we have to go through the method, or we have to use all the means that we think can help, and then we trust Allah.
Just to add to that real quick,
If I may, I would like to say that, one of the problems is that we have had knowledge, but we have not had the manifestation, the end results of the knowledge. And the end result of the knowledge is always the institution and the tangible physical progress that you can actually see. And so, Islam demands that we have progress in our life. You understand? Because Islam is a way of life that constantly progresses. And in the process right now, talking about social reforms and dealing with the needs of the community, because basically that's what Islam does. It deals with the needs of the community. And when you fulfill the needs of people, then you have the attention of people. And so now we are embarking upon a major reconstruction program here at the Philadelphia Masjid. That's why as you went down the kitchen, you went into the gym, you've seen various areas in the process of construction. One of our goals is to impact the youth. Right now we're focusing on an apprentice program where we can actually bring the youth in and let them become skilled in the trades that's really been monopolized by the unions and people who don't look like us. And our goal is to make sure that to save a lot of our youth from the penitentiary, from drugs, and from not being able to establish family life, because family life is always the heart of the community. It's the foundation by which communities grow. Because when you look at the society at whole is just a conglomeration of families living together. So the problems that we see in our communities today is because of the dysfunction in the families, and that have grew enormously. So as Muslims, we have a responsibility to address the problems of the Muslims. And then not just the Muslims, the problems of humanity. Because if we don't address the problems of humanity, then once again, they become the problems of the community as Muslims, because we all live together. And I would like to say that we have numerous brothers that went abroad that did reach out to us. From Mokfi, from Ali Davis, to Shadi, the Brother Bay, and the list goes on. But we understand that these same brothers that reach out to us, they have families, they have financial needs, they have to take care of themselves. And economically, we have not been in a position where we can actually really keep our own assets and resources. So what we witness, a lot of brothers coming from abroad, they in immigrant masjids and stuff, they up in the suburbs, you understand, teaching and things like that. And it's not that they didn't want to be with us. So we're trying to establish now an economic base so that we can actually keep our own assets, our own resources, and when the brothers do come back from abroad, we want to let them know that they have a responsibility first to their own communities and to their own people, and we're willing to embrace them in that effort.
As wrapping up this, this was a beautiful historical history in the making interview, and this was just part one, brothers and sisters. So don't get your
Stay tuned.
Stay tuned. It will be a continuing part to this interview, inshallah ta'ala, and we would like to thank all of the speakers, inshallah ta'ala, and everyone that participate. Also, Philadelphia Masjid for allowing us to conduct this interview and allowing us to take a nice tour around the facility, if you may. But one thing that I want to highlight is what Brother Imam was saying. 17 classrooms, a building that's been established in the 70s. This is something, for me, is significant because as you know, at Masjid Ibn Taymiyyah and Mahad Ibn Taymiyyah, we wanted to start a program that dealt with like a Core, if you want to say this, here in the States. And it seems to me, even with Imam Muslim being made right now, the Imam Muslim Center that the brothers are trying to raise up and establish. And it's like, yo, we're all trying to do similar things, but there is a building right here in your midst. There is things that's already established right here in your midst. While we're not sitting down, while we're sitting here trying to pour resources from multiple different communities to give their money to establish this when there are already things established and there are people are letting you. So this is something that I definitely have to think about. This is something that I think they should think about, and it's something that we should have a discussion about. Because if the facility is already there, the Prophet ﷺ will never have two, as Aisha Radha said, our mother, that the Prophet ﷺ will never have two positions that he would have to choose from, except that he would choose the what?
The best.
The easiest. So if we're sitting there all trying to find out getting buildings and getting this and getting money up, and you have something right there, that will be the easiest route. But it's something to talk about. I know it's many hands in terms of many different people, but it's something to talk about, inshallah ta'ala.
That's something we will talk about.
It's something we will talk about, inshallah.
Because that's our future. And we're either going to hang together or hang separately. And so we might as well hang together.
I mean, the thing is, we have, like I said, we have a Free Islamic Library down there in Kensington, which is historical itself because it happened in probably one of the worst neighborhoods in America. And it's a free Islamic library with Wi-Fi that two Muslims who happen to be African American from the ghetto did. And, the driving force behind it, obviously our brother right here, the Skelly, but he was the driving force behind it. And I came in, we were able to establish it and grow. The night shift grew out of it and different things grew out of it. And the whole time, though, with the invisible fear and the invisible gap that was there, we never even thought about the Philadelphia Masjid. We never even came across our minds. But like I said, we have all these things that's happening. Why can't we end up under one roof? Why can't the library be in a bigger building? Why can't, I'm not saying it has to be one library, it can still stay where it is, but why can't we establish something in this building, Free Islamic Library, where the community can come and benefit from the library? It's open to the community, and there's a lot of things that could be done with all of us bringing our resources together, inshallah ta'ala. That's just my last words on that.
Barakallahu feek. You have any words you want to depart?
Well, we just say, as a Muslim community, the Prophet, alayhi salatu wasalam, when he said, Iyakum wa shi'ab, stay away from desolate places. And then he followed it up by saying, Alaykum jama'a wal ummah wal masjid. So we have an obligation to stay together.
To stay together.
As a jama'ah, our aqidah is to be tight. But as an ummah, see, we are here in the West as an ummah. And then we have masjids. So we do have responsibilities on all three areas. Let us ask Allah to help us to start taking our responsibilities more seriously. And if we're in a desolate place, we should migrate, because see, Islam is to be lived in the vibrant centers where humanity is gathered, so that not only do we have the ability to have good relationships and just do business with each other, but we can help to work on solving problems. When we are together, we'll be face to face with our problems. And so we have more incentive to help to solve them.
MashaAllah.
So I think that, this effort here is an effort that's just the beginning. And if Allah is pleased, our efforts will be pleasing to Him, and then we'll be pleased with what we do.
Feek barakallah. And for everyone who have questions, most of the stuff I felt as though was already answered. As far as the doing something on social media, for one of the questioners, they asked about doing something on social media when you mentioned about marriage and counseling. Is there something that we can open up for that? And this is a discussion that we would like to bring up in the open dialogue. And maybe right now, one of the things of bridging gaps is not just bridging gaps between two generations, but actually pulling the resources together, getting that back off the ground, as you alluded to. And I think that the resources is not money, brothers and sisters. Resources are people. And this is one of the big significance of unity here, as you mentioned in the hadith. So if we come together, period, we have started the first thing. And then, as the Prophet ﷺ said, al-barakah Ma'a Jama'ah. You know what I mean? The Rasul made it clear. He said that what? The barakah, the blessing is going to be with the congregation. And inshallah ta'ala, these are things that we should talk about and remove ourselves from those misconceptions that are put out there. The boogeyman is with the Philadelphia Masjid or with Masjid Allah with these brothers. They're deviants, or even if you rub shoulders with them. Come on, man. We do business with the kuffar on a day-to-day basis. We sit there and even accept money from them on a day-to-day basis. And here we're sitting here talking about we can't rub shoulders with our brothers and because our aqidah or our minhaj is going to be messed up. I don't believe that. None of you should believe that, inshallah.
We advise the Christians every day about not saying Allah has a son.
No.
So I can't advise my brother with something less than that.
Come on.
It doesn't make sense at the end of the
Doesn't
day.
make sense,
Well,
inshallah.
I'd like to say we've taken our medicine and it feels good to be healthy.
سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك.